All right, so I think we have everyone that's going to join. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion. I'm Jason McDaniel, Ad Ops Manager here at the ABM Agency, and today I have our resident data brain, Adriaan van de Put. Adriaan.
Hey guys, thank you, Jason, for having me. I'm really looking forward today to be talking about reporting and account scoring for ABM today.
Awesome. And like Adriaan just said, we're going to be talking about data, account scoring, reporting. So I think it's going to be a real fun conversation. We're going to start off by talking through what it is before diving into some granular techie detail. And then finally, we're going to be answering some questions. So we'll kick things off. What is account scoring? So what is it? At a 30,000 foot view, account scoring is the process of weighting interactions that companies make in order to better understand how likely they are to become a qualified sales prospect. So why is that important? So account scoring, it allows us to understand where each company is at in their buying process, and given that previous interaction, what sort of advertising and content to serve them in order to push them down that sales funnel. So that knowledge is going to be helpful in two distinct ways. So first, it helps marketers understand when an account is ready to be pushed down to the next level in the sales funnel. So we can serve them more specific and relevant ad creative in the process. And two, it helps sales understand which accounts are ready for outreach, which saves time by eliminating wasted cold calls and allows them to have a story surrounding an account's activity on both the website and off the website. Adriaan, anything to add insofar as account scoring at a high level?
You absolutely touched on the main point. So what you want to do is you really want to capture the likelihood of targets purchasing your products, so you can accurately allocate budget and manpower. And it's also a good indicator of, it's a general health check of how your campaigns are performing. It will show you if you have like bottlenecks between different stages of the funnel. So you get to see whether, maybe between awareness and consideration, there's just not enough flow, that there's an issue, and it allows you to kind of get a health check and see what needs fixing.
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself. So now we're going to dive into the actual components of account scoring, what we call our pillars. I'm gonna shoot it back over to Adriaan. He's going to talk about these in detail.
Yeah, we have two main pillars that we use for our account scoring, being offsite data and on-site data. Your offsite data is your third-party data, tools like Bombora that show you actual intent, so that show you companies that are actively researching your products. So that's definitely very interesting. Jason, do you have anything to add on using tools like Bombora?
So what's to me interesting about these third-party tools is you're not really confined with just people who are visiting your website or visiting your properties or engaging with your advertising. So from there, what it allows you to do is to prospect accounts who may be, interested in either your product or your service, but not really know that you're in the space. So it's just a great tool to that end, in addition to all the points that Adriaan raised.
Fair enough. And that brings us to on-site data. So this is your first-party data. So the data that you capture yourself. The main tool you'll be using here is Google Analytics or maybe Adobe. Or if you're technical enough, you can use your own endpoint if you set up something through Snowplow, for instance. So in order to be able to score those companies that visit your website, you obviously need to be able to identify them first. There's a lot of different tools out there in the market that allow you to identify a visitor and then send it back to Google Analytics through a custom dimension. You have tools like Kickfire, Dun & Bradstreet, Clearbit. Bombora does it too, but a little bit less effectively.
I've heard that they sell your data too, Adriaan.
Well, I don't know, but buyer beware. It's yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Let's put it that way.
It's a co-op.
Yeah, it's very important. What's that?
I said it's a co-op.
Yeah. So you really need to know who is on your website in order to be able to score. That brings us to another, another on-site pillar being page views, so page interactions. So you want to be scoring, if you have multiple products, you want to have a different score by product. So you need to have a good way to differentiate those pages you are scoring. So you have different categories. So you have product pages, resource pages, white papers, news articles. All these different categories of pages, you want them to you want them scoring differently, because obviously a product page shows pretty high intent. Resource pages maybe even somewhat higher, white papers a little bit less, and yeah, news articles you don't really care about for your product scoring. So make sure that you don't score equally, because make sure you have somewhat of a nuanced score so that you can actively use it and it's indicative of reality.
And I think also one of the things to consider is a lot of websites, they have a substantial amount of pages, so it can kind of appear like a daunting task. So we've done scoring with websites that have over 800 pages, and the real note that rings true is, as long as that site structure is consistent and things can be categorized easily, say all of your webinars live on a specific subdirectories, all of your white papers live on a subdirectory. It really does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of the logic behind scoring those individual pages. So definitely something to keep in mind, that it may seem like a daunting task, but it's really not.
Yep, that's definitely true. That brings us to event scoring on your website. So your form fills certain CTAs that companies, or that you deem important, that companies are clicking on product pages, or anywhere really. Or maybe if you have an ROI calculator that shows clear intent, you definitely want to be tracking and scoring that. Or if it's a very long ROI calculator and you think only that, even like if they fill out 70% of it, it shows somewhat of a clear intent, score 70% of that ROI calculator. That's basically everything you can track, and that makes sense to show clear intent. Do it, go crazy with it.
Yeah, all of that you're giving yourself is more information. If you think that somebody finishing 50% of a video is valuable, by all means track it and include it in that score. So definitely a good point, Adrian. So I think that moves us into campaign interaction. So that's simply how the account is interacting with your paid campaigns and your emails, stuff like that. Any sort of channel that you're running, any sort of tactic. One thing to note in terms of campaign interaction and scoring is that we use tight UTM structure, and we recommend everyone else do the same. It's essentially just going to make it easier on the back end when you're actually trying to process this data, because it's going to allow you more fields to filter off of. So you can filter off of stage of funnel if you define that in the UTM. You can filter off product if it's defined, region, it goes down the list. So anything that you want to filter off in the future, just make sure that's clearly and accurately labeled in what the URL looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Clear differentiation between funnel stages, absolutely, because you want to be scoring your awareness campaigns way lower than you would a validation or evaluation campaign. So yeah, have strict UTM structures. Very important.
And then finally, we move into content interaction, which this can be seen kind of as like a 1 or a 0, depending on what sort of content they're actually interacting with. But it's really just how an account is interacting with your content syndication tactics. How they downloaded a white paper from a third-party content syndication network, etc. So that being said, I think we'll move on into our next slide, which is really just a high-level overview as to what we want to report on. So basically, this is a brief outline of what we think is the critical factors to ensure that your reporting isn't really leaving any gaps. And then we're going to go into detail into each of these points. So I'll start by talking about, or just going down this list. So consolidating the pillars into your account score. Basically, that's just the model surrounding the weight of each of the components that we just talked about. So, your third party, your first party, et cetera. Reporting tools, these are the data dashboards that you're going to be utilizing. Data hygiene, It's just making sure that all your data sources are consistent and clean. Combining data sources, it is what it sounds like. You're just going to be combining all the different channels into one overarching reporting dashboard. And finally, we have metrics. These are your KPIs or key performance indicators, your account scores, your pipeline growth, that sort of thing. So we'll move into the next slide. I'll pass it back to Adrian. He's going to tell you a little bit more about analytics platforms.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of data visualization platforms out there. You have your Domo, Data Studio, Tableau. We've grown pretty fond of Domo recently because it allows you to create your own pipelines and transform a fairly good amount of data. It may not be super fast, but it's very useful to, again, create pipelines, use SQL queries, magic ETL. You basically get to do everything, which obviously is not the case with a tool like Data Studio. It connects really well with all Google products, but there's so many gaps. It's so hard to mix data that is not Google native, let's say. Yeah, cleaning data inside of Data Studio is also a big hassle. So, but it's free, so I guess you get what you pay for. But it really it depends on what works for you. What is your budget in the end? Yeah,
absolutely, and that kind of segments us into data hygiene, which is just how you're importing data and cleaning that data into those backend dashboards. So first off, the first thing to consider is importing your data. There's basically two approaches. There's a manual import versus a direct API upload. Now, API is going to have some really clear advantages in terms of in it just being that it's automated. You don't have to devote man hours to actively cleaning up data and what is essentially a data entry task. But we have to be realistic here and understand that a lot of these channels that are across the space, they might not necessarily have that API connection. A lot of CRMs don't even have open API connection. So it's important to understand that on the front end when you're vetting some of these platforms, if they even have the capabilities to push this data via API, and if that's a deal breaker, then don't go with them. So just make sure you're completely aware of that from the onset. Secondly, we have keeping field headers consistent. So this is just in terms of making sure that the table structure of the data that you're importing has the same field headers. It's matching the same column with the same column. Everything is consistent. The data type is consistent. Because if it's not, the table's going to break down. It's not going to work. It's not going to report accurately, and it could even just completely break the entirety of the dashboard. So you got to be super careful there. Do a little bit of massaging if you need to, and then move on. So we also want to talk about keeping track of UTM structure. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be critical in terms of all of your filtering later on. So as long as your UTMs from the onset were super tight, you should be able to, provide a lot of or enable a lot of filters on that data. So if you want to look at specific accounts, if you want to look at specific products, how the performance looks to that end, that's where your filters are valuable. And then since Adrian said a cliche, I'll say the same. I'll say a cliche of my own. So garbage in, garbage out. That's one of those age-old adages for data warehouses. So just keep it in mind.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. It's just maybe just adding to data hygiene. Yeah, so UTMs, use lower cases across the board. Differentiate, make sure that, when for instance, you're using the Google API, that you export through, you use hostname plus pastepath, that you don't just get the pastepath out. So, you get an accurate representation of the data you're getting.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move into combining data sources, which I think is a really interesting conversation. So I'm going to start by kind of outlining what database structure looks like. So for databases, there's an idea of a key value in which two different database tables can be linked together or merged on. So for us, in basically all instances, that key value is going to be domain. And even though a lot of ad platforms like Google Ads don't natively have the ability to report on domain, using on-site account identification software, the visitor intelligence that Adrian talked about earlier, as long as it's plugged directly into your analytics platform, so say your Google Analytics, you can match a domain to a significant amount of on-site traffic from that channel. So from there, you have domain, you have interaction with your quote unquote your Google Ads, for example. You can now connect that data source to domain level reporting from other channels. So that includes your third-party data. That's your Bombora information. That includes your programmatic, which the majority of programmatic platforms that we've vetted have the capability of targeting by account and by job title, and includes your content marketing, which you can pull a domain if it's not at the root level, you can at least pull it from the email of the lead that comes through. Your Salesforce data operates on a similar principle, as does your Marketo data. And there's really no shortage of what you can combine it with, as long as you have that domain key associated with the information. You can merge it all together, and what this allows is us to report on accounts at a largely multi-channel footprint. So we really like to look at every single touch along the path to qualified opportunity. Adrian, anything to add there?
No, you were fairly clear here. Just when a couple of questions to ask. Do we need everything in one data set? Can we maybe just use or add different data sets and then use common fields to pivot on domain or maybe on product? Just questions to ask before you start.
Absolutely. And then we just talk about metrics. So the metrics is just the culminating of all that data import. So you have your standardized stuff, your impressions, your clicks, your CTR, which stands for click-through rate, by the way, cost, conversion, stuff like that. And then, given that we've done a lot of heavy lifting separating all of our data sources into hyper granular rows in the database structure, we can now filter it and segment it by account level, by job title. We can see account score there. And I think it's going to be super helpful in terms of actually, using this data for, all levels of, the team, the organization. So I think that transitions us nicely into what we do with this information, what happens to it. Adrian?
Sure. When you're creating dashboards, you always want to create it with an end user in mind, right? So your dashboards for C-suite will be entirely different than your dashboard for sales or your dashboard for marketing. For C-suite, you definitely want to focus on pipeline, maybe some high-level customer journeys, some high-level multi attribution, so they know where the money's going and how effectively that is being spent. For sales, you want to be focusing on visualizing accounts that show clear intent, and that should be prioritized in the sales process. And then for marketing, you want to be focusing on actual performance metrics. Maybe you show some more granular customer journeys. You want to be showing, how is the different ad creative performing? How are our A/B tests doing? Stuff like that. You want to be focusing also on micro conversions, like little signs that show that your campaigns are doing well or poorly, of course.
Yeah, so just a decrease of granularity as you move up the chain. So marketing, they're just looking to optimize the campaign based on all the parameters so their tactics can improve. Sales, they just want to know which accounts are ready for outreach, and then what have they been touched by. And then C-suite is really solely interested in pipeline and cost of ad spend. So that's the high level. So I think I know everyone's super busy, and we're gonna finish things off with a Q&A. So don't be shy. If you have any questions, just type them in chat, and we'll stick around for the last couple of minutes and try to answer some of them. No questions. All right. Well, if no one has any questions, then we'll sign off now. And everyone enjoy your Friday and your weekend. And yeah, thank you for joining us as we said earlier.
Bye, guys.
Bye.